And we're live. Welcome back to LinkedIn Live, our VeeamON 2023 recap show. So my name is Matt Price, joined with a few colleagues that you may be familiar with from previous episodes. First and foremost, we're simulcasting on LinkedIn Live as well as YouTube Live. So let's keep this as interactive as possible. If you guys have any questions, per usual, make sure you drop those in the chat. Anthony, Ryan, what was last week about? Wasn't that a whirlwind event?
It was over so fast, I can barely remember a single thing. So I'm going to do everything in my power to pull it together for this event.
Yeah, it was amazing. Lots of great conversations all around, and one busy week, conversation to conversation, to party to party to party. It was definitely a great time in Miami at VeeamON.
Yeah, I know one thing that was pretty much a constant between everybody is we essentially almost all lost our voices. So now that we finally got those back in check, to Brian's point, we just had constant conversations, which is a great thing. And it's funny, as we start things off on, our thoughts and recap from last week, you ended that little montage we put together with our giveaway. So Anthony, tell us about that.
Yeah, so it was super exciting. Our whole theme for the VeeamON 2023 from Object First was to never be game over when fighting the battle against ransomware. So we had Matt's rocking the shirt. We had a very cool booth set up. We had an Xbox with Geometry Wars 2 Retro Evolved, and we had a little contest running throughout the day. And we had some pretty good back and forth battles. Everyone was fighting for this high score, which I think creeped up to 4 million by the end of the day. But the gentleman who you saw in the video who had the orange device in his hand walked away with a brand new Utbe branded Steam Deck, which is just the coolest toy you could possibly get. We went out of our way to make sure we snagged something really cool to give away. And it was a great battle, well earned, and congratulations to him for winning. And I hope you're playing some awesome games on there.
Yeah, I know there was a heated battle right at the end where several people just went back and forth, and ultimately he was the victor.
I did not try to goad them into Mortal Kombat or anything like that. Very scholarly, very gentlemanly. So turned out well.
Right on. Well, we had another big event. We had Ratmir's legendary vodka happy hour. So talk to me about how that went. I know it was epic for me. There was a lot of familiar faces there, and we packed it out.
Yeah, so that was huge. In events past, I have heard tell of these legendary Ratmir parties that have occurred. This is my first opportunity to attend one, but Ratmir brought the heat. There was imported vodka from all over the place, only Premier, his favorites. But it was a great time. Everyone was there. Everyone got to hang out, socialize. It was very much a get to spend time with the whole Object First Utbe team and get some FaceTime with Ratmir, which is always awesome. There's great tunes playing. It was a great venue. Fun was had by all.
Yeah, I think it was amazing. A great mixture of end users that were more interested in Utbe and also wanting to meet Ratmir. He's obviously very popular, right, amongst amongst the Utbe crowd and the Veeam crowds, right, and a lot of Veeam contacts were there. It was great catching up with them, understanding, building that relationship. But then also our partners, right, that are out there that are attended. Can't forget them. But then the networking, just everything that went on there beyond from the show, it really helped, not necessarily talk about business all the time, just get to know everybody, a bit better outside of the Utbe, the Veeam relationship altogether.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was about networking and socializing with our partners and our end users and peers and former colleagues, to your point, Ryan. And, carrying that over with the general theme of events, we had the whole week was capped off by the Decades Veeam party. The one thing that stuck out to me, you guys might have caught it in the montage, was they actually had a legit Pong game inside the Veeam party.
That was awesome. And I noticed in almost every photo, Matt, you look like you were having an absolute blast. So
always.
Yeah, no, it was an awesome theme, awesome party. And just the entire venue for the event was very well decorated. It was in beautiful Miami. The weather was almost perfect. There was a mini monsoon halfway through. Sorry, Florida can't help but throw the rain when it can. But I think we made the most of it, all things considered.
Yeah, I would agree completely. Yeah, it was a really good turnout to the party, and that was a good way to kind of cap off the week. They had a live band, so that was a lot of fun. A lot of, the VIPs were there at the party as well. So again, networking and socializing continued through the night. So all in all, I thought it was a really, really productive week. So really a couple of things that stuck out to me, and I want to kind of start this and get your take on some of the technology. So we kind of talked about our general, take on the event as a whole. And a couple things when I was watching the keynote that really resonated. And when Anand was up there doing the keynote, one of the quotes he had on one of his slides said, "The secret to survivable backups is immutability." And, obviously that resonates with us, with Utbe, our actual product name, out of the box immutability, to see that on main stage and to see that that's top of mind with virtually everybody, in attendance, whether they're end users or partners or, even Veeam employees as well as Object First employees. So that was one of the big key things that resonated. And the other one was, and this was a little concerning, but I think we all kind of agree that this is a problem we need to solve. 16% of organizations, he said, were able to recover themselves without paying the ransom. The only problem is that's down from 19% the year previous. So that's actually in a negative decline, which is bad. That means fewer people are actually able to recover, when they are impacted from ransomware. So guys, I would love your, take on that. What do you think about the content as far as the event itself? What stood out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, even in your recap video, Matt, and there's that you saw me kind of leaning in doing my presentation there.
Yep.
My presentation, believe it or not, I would say 85% of it was not about Object First or OOTB. It was about just the state of how bad things are right now. And I'm currently working on a paper to kind of elaborate further on the presentation. So stay tuned. We'll be posting that in the next month. But ransomware is really bad right now. And just like your statistic said, even when you have immutable backups, if you have not tested, if you have not practiced, if you don't have a breach counsel on hand, and you don't have an understanding of just how invasive ransomware is, recovery is not always guaranteed. The backups will still be there, yes, and they will be immutable. But if you have no idea what you're doing, or if you haven't actually practiced how to reconnect, reconfigure, get those backup data back, even paying for it is not a guaranteed success to get your data back. It's a pretty sad state of affairs, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I think that number, that 16% of the organizations recover. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that go into that, and backups are just one piece. And that ability to recover is great. Knowing those backups weren't affected, they weren't encrypted based on what hit the network, right? UPI and other solutions can help with that, but there's also security platforms that you have in place, all the different arrows in the quiver that you need to use to fully isolate that. So it's not probably one place to point on why they couldn't recover. But I think, having the ability to have the backups, again, one arrow in the quiver versus some of the other solutions that are a little bit more proactive, having those backups be that last resort to get back up and running. And hopefully you figured out at that point, where was the intrusion at, and it can be cleaned up at that point from the backup you're recovering.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumped out to me as well, back to the keynote, is Anand had a slide around the 32110 rule. And, that's something that I actually did a blog that's on our website about. But to me, that, and you guys talked about it with being able to recover, it's absolutely critical that we're doing tests to ensure that the backups are recoverable.
Yes.
And, one of the things on the 32110 is the second one in that string is either one air gapped, one offline, or one immutable. So it's the keyword or. It's not necessarily saying that you need air gapped, offline, and immutable, but you've got to have at least one of those to ensure you're fully protected. And with UTB, the immutability is just a checkbox, right? So that extra one is already guaranteed if you're using us for the backup target. And, in addition to that, one of the other things that really stood out that, I knew about when I was working at Veeam, certainly it's a capability that we've demoed in the past over there, but it really resonated because it was on that slide, and that did get me thinking a bit, is the whole staged recovery to prevent reinfection. So we all know that, Veeam has Sure Backup that allows people to test their backups for recoverability. UTB can power that with our performance. But what happens when you do get hit with ransomware? You do have immutable backups, but what if they were infected when they were written, right? Yes, they have not changed since they land on the repository, or since they landed, on that repo. But when you go through the motions of doing the recovery, that's one additional advantage that UTB can power, because it leverages instant recovery to power those workloads up in an isolated space first, to make sure that they're scanned and they're safe to actually restore back into production. That's another big piece to this overall puzzle.
Yeah, and I would just, in your testing journeys, a free tip, 2 free tips in your testing journeys, ensure that you consider the absolute worst case scenario. What if you only had your immutable storage? No network, no storage switch, no backup software, no infrastructure whatsoever. What do you do? Consider that scenario, because that is the most likely with how invasive it's become as far as an infrastructure attack. And the second tip, you're already on LinkedIn, which is great. Make sure you have all of your coworkers and people that you need to get in contact with connected on LinkedIn, because they love to blow away Active Directory as well. So I would definitely offer those 2 as a freebie. And one is very easy because you're already here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Anthony, what about Kasten? Did you catch a couple things that they announced around Kasten?
I did. So it's pretty exciting. I've always been a Kubernetes fan, even before, when it was back in the Docker days. I think containers really are the future. I think they're starting to really catch on from an application development and infrastructure perspective, Kasten is the best way on the market today to protect your Kubernetes infrastructure. And I think a lot of people in DevOps often think to themselves like, oh, I don't need to protect Kubernetes because it's a completely, spin up, spin down deployable infrastructure, but that's actually not true. Kubernetes is just as vulnerable to ransomware as anything else is. And it might not be the applications, but it's the underlying infrastructure it runs on. Whether it's the storage volumes or your actual cluster configuration, ransomware's smart. They know when you're switching to new, better technologies, and it's going to go after that. So all of the updates that were talked about for Kasten K10 version 6 were about further integrations and upgrades to really kind of give that complete ransomware resiliency strategy, including some of the big ticket items integrating directly into the Veeam data management platform. So now you can monitor and manage all of these backups from a singular location, kind of bring it into the Veeam family. The other thing I'll mention too is the support for S3, right? Like S3 is your standard object storage communications API protocol. While Kasten does not support the Smart Object Storage API today, S3 does mean that you could send your Kasten backups to our OOPI object storage and have your Kasten backups in an immutable repository. So while it may not be as blindingly fast as we'd like it to be, it's still a recommendation. And I would definitely check out some of those K10 V6 upgrades that came, because there are a lot, and it's good eating for ransomware resiliency, specifically around Kubernetes.
Yeah, no doubt. What about Microsoft 365, Ryan? Did you catch a couple tidbits there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest numbers that jumps out, I believe, is over 15 million users are, mailboxes and accounts with Microsoft Office 365 are being backed up, which is, I think, a crazy number. Depending on, how many other solutions are out there, but Veeam has, that best solution, and why they are the market leader with the Office 365 backup. But, of course, version 7 was all the big talk. It wasn't too long ago before VeeamON that version 7 was released. And then coming back to what they did with Kasten, bringing it into the data management platform to be able to do some monitoring. So there's a lot of great stuff in the VeeamON perspective of monitoring those Office 365 jobs. And one of the biggest features I think they've added over the past couple of years is around that self-service recovery. And they actually now included the Teams portion of that with the self-service portal. So again, it's empowering the end users to go do their own recovery without having to get the IT team involved, and whoever's managing Office 365, again, takes one thing less off their plate that they have to do. But I'm going to probably say the biggest feature functionality of version 7 is immutability, right? Be able to have that immutable backup, have backup copies, right? Going from one object storage, and maybe that's backing up to Azure for some of that performance, just going from Office 365 into Azure, and then maybe a backup copy on-prem to object storage like OOPI. But again, just providing multiple copies of that data. Again, going back to that 3-2-1, rule. Not necessarily, testing backups with Office 365 quite yet, but again, having multiple copies, making sure you're always ready to be able to do a recovery no matter where it lives. So I think big enhancement there, protecting those Office 365 backups with immutability, and again, having something like OOPI that can help with that as well.
Yeah. And, Ryan, you talked about going from, essentially Azure to Azure as your initial step, but then definitely getting something out of the Azure cloud. So that also reminds me something else I saw in the keynote with Anand's presentation is he was talking about resiliency domains. And to me, on his slide, I believe he had a hardened Linux repo, a dedupe box, and then Cloud Connect or some sort of cloud off-prem storage. And essentially, that's 3 separate resiliency zones. And that's also very, very critical when you look at your overarching data protection and ransomware protection strategy, is you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And when we look at, some other players in the space that have all-in-one appliances, all your eggs are in that single basket, much like if you were running in Microsoft 365 and you only let your backups live there. What happens if Microsoft has an outage? It's happened, right? So you've got to create these different resiliency zones so that you're able to recover. And the more diversity and the more disparate environments you can get that backup data in, it's just increasing your survival rate, when you're hit with ransomware. So that's also a big thing to consider. So you've got Veeam running on a Veeam server doing the backups. You've got Ootbee as your landing target. So that's 2 already. And then, as we've said many times on this particular show, we still highly recommend 321 getting that data somewhere else. So that would be a third level of redundancy or resiliency zones, whether that's a cloud target of your choice, maybe another Ootbee at your second location. There's a lot of choices, at this point, but that's also key to remember when you're strategizing and you're laying out your overarching data protection strategy.
And I think that's important as well, that you have that resiliency across the different areas of those backups. That I think there's a lot of fluff out there from in the marketplace of its complexity and having the option, but having the flexibility to choose really where you want data to go, the different types of storage that you can use, all across the first backup to the second copy to that third copy. Again, that can be multiple Ootbees. It can be other storage, that Veeam works with. It can be cloud, it can be tape. I mean, that's still a viable option. There's a whole partner spectrum of Veeam service providers, right, that you can send backups to. And it's just providing extra layers of those backups. And you know what? Maybe it's not everything. Maybe it's the tier 1, VMs that you really need those multiple copies of versus, say, the tier 2, tier 3, where, okay, maybe you only have 2 other copies. So everybody's different. They're SLAs. So.
Right.
And listen, we were all there Tuesday night. If you weren't, Miami got a little bit flooded because of the rain. But on a Florida man scale, that was like a 5 out of 10 storm. That's nothing. And I think some folks at the event were quite shocked by the amount of rain that we can get. And there's one thing data centers don't like, and it's water. So, it's important to consider where your information is stored and located and how you move it geographically to a secondary location that would not be hit by the same disaster if there was one.
Yeah, completely agree. So guys, let's move into the next segment. Like, what's on deck? What did you guys see that's coming down the pipe that really resonated? And, for me, I'll start the ransomware detection mechanism. So when Anton was doing his live bit via virtual, he talked about Veeam has 2 different ways that they're able to actually detect ransomware, one of which is already here today, and that's essentially the post-process scanning. But they're also working on an inline detection mechanism, so it actually can detect during the backup. Now, even on his slide, and it's also important to point out, either one of these methods means you're already infected with ransomware. That means it's already there. So you're already at risk of being encrypted. So it's still very important to have immutable backups like we've been preaching, since inception. But I did find that very fascinating that they're continuing to innovate, like they do, new ways to help, at least alert you that ransomware has been detected so you can take immediate action rather than waiting for it to perhaps lock or encrypt your files.
Yeah, that was a big one. I think the other major announcement that was pretty exciting is the backup from object storage, which some people might be like, oh, I don't get it. Why would you back up from object if you're sending data there? But again, it's all about ensuring that 32110, I'm sure we're going to add more numbers as time goes by, being able to get data off a place, keeping it immutable, putting it somewhere else and making it immutable. That is key. That is truly the only way to really stand up to ransomware in this day and age, is just having as many copies in as many immutable places as you can. And that feature is just one other way that you can ensure that data remains mobile and resilient.
Yeah, I think that's gonna grow, especially as more users are starting to use object storage. I mean, we think it's the best for backups, obviously, but there's other use cases. We have quite a few blog posts out there. Media, right? A repository for images that are maybe being uploaded to a website, videos, surveillance. Thinking of like doctor's office X-rays. I mean, if they don't have another copy of that, what happens if that was to go down? It just gives them, again, get it out, get it backed up, have another place to go. To do a recovery. So I think that's important. And also with that backup from object storage as part of the enhancements to that smart object storage API, I really like the on-prem, essentially be able to use that as Glacier, right? As that archive tier versus having to be, I think Glacier supported today, I believe, Azure, cold storage from an archive tier. So there's a lot of great things that come in respects to that with on-prem, object storage.
Yeah, I think we can all agree object storage is the future, and to see Veeam continuing to innovate with that API is very refreshing. It just gives our customers, our joint customers, Veeam plus Object First, more places to pull data from and land on the UPI appliance. So it's the best of all worlds, right? One other thing that I wanted to get y'all's take on, and this is a little bit off script, but the robot. So when Anthony was doing the robot, right, on stage, Spiteri, the actual Veeam dog robot, I mean, does that give anybody the willies? Like, you've seen Skynet, you've seen Terminator, we're too far down the rabbit hole.
So my wife and I have been following Boston Dynamics, which is the company that invented that technology, since the very first video they posted on YouTube. And I think she showed it to me. It freaked me out. I was like, this can't be real. Now I've seen it in real life, and I'm absolutely horrified. But the truth of the matter is, any kind of AI sort of learning model relies on object storage because of the metadata that you can basically encapsulate the object with. And seeing a robot, use AI to navigate around a room, we're seeing objects be used in real time, like these learning mechanics and mechanisms. It's impressive and amazing, and it's just one more piece of endpoint technology that we're going to think about. How do we ensure that if this is compromised,
right,
we can put it back in a functional state? Because I hate to think what happens if that thing gets hit by ransomware.
Right. That was my fear when it was running through the audience. I'm like, well, I hope the code is protected.
I'm not going to tackle that dog. That's all I'm saying.
Right. So guys, as we kind of wrap up, let's talk about some Object First specific updates. So Anthony, I heard we're doing a little bit of shifting with our core values and pillars.
Yes. So if you were at that conference, you already know, but we've shifted the way we talk about UPI. So we are now calling ourselves secure, simple, and powerful. And the big change there is secure, because we are a ransomware proof device at the end of the day. And based on everything we've seen and heard from these events and how we've built our product to really be zero access out of the box, we thought it's important that the first word you hear when talking about Object First UPI is immutability. It is zero access. Really focus in on that security pillar. So we've made that shift, and now we're secure, simple, and powerful. That's all you need to know when you hear about Object First UPI.
Yeah, I love it. And so what about it's something that you and I have talked about before with zero access. This is something that's really important for our viewers to understand, right?
Don't get me on a tangent, because if we start talking about zero trust, we'll never end this thing. But it's been a journey, right? Zero trust came out a few years ago as sort of this marketing buzzword. Trust no one, not even your local admins. And in principle, it's just good security practices, right? Assume everyone can be compromised at any time, because we're all human. We can all be hacked, and we're all infallible in different ways. Zero access is the real deal, though. Where zero trust is a buzzword, zero access is something that you can actively build into your product. And we've done that here. When you hear, Ryan talk about UPI, he does his demos, and you've seen the configuration stage. We give zero backend access. There's zero root privileges. As an admin, you cannot delete anything unless the bucket is completely empty with no immutable data in it. There's no way a privileged user can use our box for nefarious means. And it is truly zero access in that regard. And that's something that people need to start looking for as a marketing buzzword when shopping around for products, because if there is admin privilege, if you are a root user, you are the problem at the end of the day. And you have access to things that, while you might not do harm with, someone with your password would. And it's something that everyone needs to think about and consider moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when we were at the show last week doing some demos, it's also important when we talk about support and how we engage support. So let's say someone did find themselves in a scenario where they needed to reset an UPI node. You actually can't do that, to your point at the command line. You have to engage our support department. They have to vet you and ensure you are who you say you are before that process can even proceed. So it's almost like multi-factor authentication comes enabled out of the box for the command line, and you then have MFA you can enable in the web UI. So talk about hardening. We've got it on the front end and the back end.
Yeah, I think the only thing we're missing right now is we need to make sure the box is electrified from the outside. So if you try to touch it or anything, you get a nice mild shock. That'll
like
really
it.
keep the intruders out.
I feel like that's an easy mod. We could make that happen.
Okay, we'll add that as an add-on.
Have a disclaimer on the front of the bezel.
Do not touch. Really don't though.
So before we give some final thoughts, Anthony, aren't you going to another VeeamON if anybody's
Yes.
watching from overseas?
Yes. So if you are in the European region, I will be going to Europe. Hopefully, I'm getting my passport in next week. So all things considered, we'll be in Amsterdam, Marsen, as well as VeeamON Dublin and Munich. So be sure to swing by. Either myself or our CEO, David Bennett, will be there, and we'll be happy to talk with you as best we can, because, we don't always speak the native language, but we will do our absolute best. So be sure to swing by, have a conversation, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Very cool. I'm sure that'll be an awesome time. So Ryan, final thoughts from last week.
Yeah, I mean, the final thoughts are it was a great show, I think, for all of us. The conversations just around on-prem immutability, whether someone came to our booth knowing what we did, whether they didn't know what we did and didn't know who we were. They came and walked away with that knowledge of, hey, there is an on-prem solution for immutability. UPI, out of the box immutability is what we call it, not to repeat it for umpteenth time.
One more time, Ryan.
On the show, right? We're backup storage. We got to be redundant, right? We got to believe what we say. But I think it just arms people knowing what options they have out there, what's going to protect their backups, just from an entire scheme of their production data all the way down to that one single backup that's immutable. And I think that's the important option.
Yep. Anthony, what was your take?
My takeaway was the flu. I took it home with me, and I've been getting over it for like the last 5 days. So apologies for any of the coughs or sniffles on this call. But no, I agree with Ryan. The ultimate takeaway is if you weren't there, ransomware is really bad right now, y'all. And you just need to consider it from every single possible angle, because it's getting worse. So, it's one of those things where I think as software developers, we're trying to always ensure that Veeam, UPI, whatever the platform is, we're better at securing and ensuring that you don't have to deal with it. But at the end of the day, when it happens, because it will, you need to have a strategy to deal with it. And, ideally it doesn't break everything, but expect failure.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, obviously I echo everything you guys are saying. And one of the things that really resonated to me at the booth is how many people didn't realize we were on-prem. So it was a really good, opportunity to explain and chat with those customers that we are actually a tangible physical unit, that actually goes in their data center. So that was, like Ryan said, that's why we all lost our voices, because it was constant great conversations the whole week. A lot of great traffic, a lot of great Veeam innovation. So really looking forward to how we're going to work better together with Veeam and, Object First creating that ironclad ransomware solution. So with that, we really do appreciate everyone joining. Be sure, if you haven't already, to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to do more things like this, more videos coming down the pipe, some great content and topics on deck. So once again, thank you guys for stopping in and chatting with us. If you were there last week, it was good to see you. If you weren't, hey, we missed you. Maybe we'll catch you on the next one. Anthony, Ryan, thanks for your time, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.